Hey everyone, it's Colin from GIY Guy. Thanks for checking out today's video on how to trellis your blackberry plants. If you are a first-year grower, you've probably got primicanes popped up that are 1 to 2 feet tall, which is super fun. I remember being excited that it wasn't just a stick that I planted in the ground and that it actually grew something. Or maybe you're a second-year grower and you've got floricanes popped up like I do, where the flowers are super pretty and you just come out and watch the bees and smell them every day. But maybe you've got your floricanes trellis and now your primicanes are starting to pop up and you're thinking, I'm out of trellis space, where am I going to put these primicanes? In this video, I'm going to go over a couple things to think about as you plan your trellis design and your just overall blackberry patch. And then to wrap up the video, I'll go over my trellis design and a couple tips that I've learned over the last couple years. The first thing to keep in mind as you grow blackberries is how to space your plants. So general rule of thumb is to space your plants about every 4 feet and then space your rows about every 8 feet. The row spacing can change depending on what kind of trellis design you use, but generally you probably want about 4 to 5 feet of walking space between the rows. That way it makes it easy to do all the maintenance stuff and harvest your blackberries. Also, the reason I say about 4 feet between plantings is because if you do 3 feet like I did, then you'll probably have to end up pruning a lot over the fall because they get tangled up, and you really want to manage your airflow well so you avoid disease and fungus. The second important thing to think about is what kind of blackberry variety are you growing? Are you growing one that fruits on the first year canes or the second year canes? I think Primark Freedom is the only one, at least that I know of, that fruits on the first year. Most of the other ones fruit on the second year. I've got Kiowa behind me and they fruit on the second year. So the thing to keep in mind is that every year after that first year of planting, you're going to have basically 2 sets of canes. You're going to have the primicanes and you're going to have the floricanes. Now, to do your future self a favor and save yourself a lot of time and energy, I would recommend doing basically 2 trellis lanes within each row. On one trellis lane, you're going to have the primicanes. On the other trellis lane, you're going to have the floricanes, and they're just going to alternate every year as primicanes and floricanes do. Those are the 2 things I wanted to hit on. Now I'll go ahead and show you my trellis design. I tried to give you a better angle of my trellis design. You can see it's 2 layers. I've got a top layer here and a bottom layer here, and then I've basically got 2 lanes like I was mentioning before. So on this side closest to me, I'll have the primicanes, and on the far side, I'll have the floricanes. There is a method to the madness. The primicanes are on this side because the floricanes are on that side closest to the sun, because the sun comes from that direction, and I didn't want the primicanes shading the berries when they start to ripen. So to give you a better view of my cable design, you can see the one cable right here for my primicanes, and then over here, I've got my floricanes already, all trellised along that cable. It's kind of hard to see because it's covered. So down here we've got primicanes popping up. They're about 1 foot or 2 tall. They'll be trellised up on this left side here. So I'll start them off on this first row, and then as they get bigger we'll move to the top row. And then you can see the floricanes are trellised on that right side. You'll notice I have about 4 or 5 primicanes in each grouping here. I'll definitely thin those down to probably 3 of the strongest canes, but I won't do that until they're at this first trellis. That way I can see which ones are really the strongest and the thickest, because we don't want to keep a little baby if there's a really thick cane that's popping up that's going to be a lot stronger. Before we wrap up, I want to show you 2 things about my trellis design. The first is that you can probably see behind me, that's why I gave you this camera angle, you can see that this post, and probably that one too, are not straight up and down anymore. I thought that using a 6-foot support post would be plenty, thinking 5 feet above ground, 1 foot below ground. I even used a concrete footer, and the posts are still starting to pull toward each other with all the tension on these 6 cables. So here's what the post would look like straight up and down, and here's how much the cables have pulled it sideways. In my opinion, crooked post is not something I'm going to worry about with this design. I could take cable and tie it into the ground and try to pull those posts apart, but that would probably look worse than it does now. So moving forward in my next design, I'd probably put my post 2 feet into the ground with a concrete footer. The second thing I wanted to show you is how to pull your cables tight. My dad did tell me there is something you can, like a piece of hardware you can put in the middle of your cable, and it actually, you can tighten it with a screwdriver or a wrench, and it'll pull the cables tight. The problem with this is that it only gives you maybe 2 or 3 inches of tightening, so your cables have to be pretty tight already, and you can't adjust them as things sag or anything. So that's why I wanted to show you my tightening design, which I thought was pretty cool. So originally I had 2 of these little, eye bolts or whatever they're called on each end of my trellis, and I actually left them mostly unscrewed, and then I pulled the cable as tight as I could, clamped it, and then I screwed in each bolt, so it gave me another couple inches of tightening. That worked pretty well until my posts started pulling in, you know, up 3 or 4 inches, and then they were sagging again. So that's when I changed my design. I decided, instead of clamping my cable to the eye bolt directly, I went ahead, clamped my cable with a loop at the end, and then I made it so that I could pull my trellis tight through this eye bolt. You know, it kind of sags down. If I let it out, I can release as much slack or tighten it as much as I want. And then I pull it as tight as I could. I put a screw into the wood, and then all I do is take that loop around there, and it's as tight as I want it to be. Then all I have to do is unscrew this screw, and I can keep moving it farther out if I want it tighter, or I can move it in if I want it looser. So I just thought that was a really cool idea that I wanted to share with you guys. If you use a wood trellis design like this, then it works great. If you use a T-post design, you can probably find a way to make it work with a bolt. It'll just be a little bit different. But that's the general concept behind tightening my trellis. Well, that's all I've got for today's video. Hopefully it helped you with your trellis design and blackberry planting. Hopefully the guy mowing across the street, it wasn't too loud. But with that, I hope you enjoy your day. Keep growing yourself, and I'll catch you in the next one.